Coming in at number 10, we've got SCP-3812. So how do you stop a being that can alter reality? Seriously, they can just will you away or change your perception of the world so you no longer exist, which is why 3812 is way too dangerous to be kept alive. But there's not much that anyone can do about it. Originally a man named Sam Hoswell, 3812 rose from its grave and disappeared. It was brought to the Foundation's attention after destroying an apartment complex in Poland and has since become very difficult to track. The being has exhibited signs of schizophrenia in the past, including paranoia, dysphoria, the inability to properly perceive its surroundings, hearing voices that aren't there, and experiencing stimuli that just don't exist. These symptoms were manageable at first but have since worsened. And there probably isn't a situation out there that gets any worse than an omnipotent reality bender with absolutely zero grasp on reality. Uh-oh. In being unable to accurately perceive the world around it, 3812 will alter reality in order to diminish the discrepancy between its perception and the way the world actually is. It's impossible to know how often reality has been changed, but sometimes we can tell when it leaves behind evidence. These traits make it impossible to contain, as it can always remove whatever's containing it or just simply move itself elsewhere. Over time, 3812 became less humanoid, manifesting in all sorts of shapes and sizes. As this happened, it also began causing anomalous events on local reality. Random, violent outbursts that dramatically shift or damage local space and time have been reported, which could become largely disastrous if not contained. The doctor supervising 3812 believes it to be the most dangerous anomaly on Earth and potentially in the whole universe. See, no equipment can detect it, throwing off all previous estimates about the measurements of reality. It's likely that it exists in a way we could never understand or measure, and it's also caused an XK class scenario, became a star, and then wiped the memory of everyone save for a few Foundation bigwigs. So that is definitely world ending. So where do you even go from there? Coming in at number 9, we've got SCP-2845. Ah yes, the godlike deer, the one with the crazy containment procedures. This is always fun to read up on, even if it destroying the world isn't so enjoyable. First and foremost, it's known for its ability to instantaneously transmutate and reconstruct matter, and that is a big deal. Essentially, anything it can see can be changed. 2845 tends to skew its transformations towards certain elements, seeming to prefer metallic hydrogen and helium. This doesn't bode well for most life on Earth, considering that a lot of things need more than two elements to exist. But hey, you might get lucky and end up transformed into a hexagonal column with rubbery skin. Your brain continues to work while you're inside this column, but you can't do anything, which is a fun eternal prison to be trapped in. And if neither of the above happened to you, the fallout caused by 2845 transforming the atmosphere into new elements will catch up to you eventually. So to summarize, if this thing is to run free, we're all pooched. Thankfully, the Foundation has figured out a way to keep it relatively stable and still. They perform this incredibly complicated and gruesome ritual every single day, over and over again, front to back, starting the first step again immediately after the final step is completed. If this ritual is to ever stop, the SCP will go free, but for now, thanks to an inhuman and possibly godly function of its intelligence, it actually believes that the ritual does indeed keep it in place. So, we will believe that it will do so indefinitely, hopefully. Coming in at number 8, we've got SCP-343. Gosh darn it, or god dang it if you please. Either way, this entity is essentially unstoppable. He goes by the title of a very popular deity, God. We haven't come up with a way to disprove this either. Thankfully, he's usually in a pretty good mood and largely wants to hang out in containment and chat with various Foundation personnel, which is a big load off our minds, but doesn't really take away from the fact that at any given point, SCP-343 could end the entire world. Or maybe it already has ended the world and we're experiencing consciousness at his whim. See, 343 appears to be a very, very powerful reality bender, able to walk in and out of containment no problem, generate any object at will, and cause people to really trust and enjoy his presence. The limits of his powers have not been seen so far as anyone knows. He could do anything. But for now, he chooses not to destroy or run rampant, but instead likes to laze about while conversing about any topic that can come up. At one point, a Foundation researcher decided to do a little extra digging on the origins and goals of 343, but that person has since disappeared. Did they ever really exist? I can't find anything in the records about it. Probably nothing to worry about. At least that's what 343 wants me to think. Coming in at number 7, we've got a 001 proposal, When Day Breaks. Literally an alternate universe in which the world has ended. It's super weird and scary, like nothing most would imagine. Something happens to the sun and sunlight becomes a crazy mutagen. It causes people to turn into a waxy, gooey jelly while still maintaining their general physical form. And it's not just people, animals, anomalies, and pretty much anything else organic also assimilate into this goo. And then and they try to assimilate more people, usually by mimicking old behaviors in an attempt to pull others in. Very freaky. Plus, somehow somebody found out that it was safe to eat in small amounts. Don't ask how, it's not worth the mental trauma. All in all, wicked apocalypse, 10 out of 10, goo for days. Coming at number 6, we've got SCP-3007. Now this one is a real doozy. If you're affected by it, that's only the beginning. See, 3007 afflicts folks with terrible realistic visions. They feel as if they've been dropped into a whole new world, complete with crumbling futuristic architecture and the remains of all sorts of creatures. While it might seem that they're actually in a whole different place, it's actually just their senses that have been transported. The physical body remains behind, moving around as if they were indeed somewhere else. So sometimes folks do die by like falling down the stairs or getting hit by a car and not realizing it. Pretty lame way to go once you realize how you could die someday. Get this. In the alternate reality folks discover when their senses are transported by 3007, there is a hall full of paintings that you can find. And these works of art depict the history of that world with a flourishing civilization rising from squalor. It seems like a triumphant story at first, but then you get to the end. There is an evil, corrupting presence, and it came to this world and stripped it of everything, consuming it all. Then it moved on, leaving nothing but a festering shell behind, and guess where it seems to be heading next? Earth. That's right, in one of the paintings it can clearly be seen that this red aura of sorts has targeted our lovely blue marble, and we're all screwed once it shows up. We'll go the way of this other society. Thanks for the warning though. Coming in at number 5, we got SCP-096. Everybody's favorite, the Shy Guy. This wonderful world-rending rarity could hypothetically kill every living human on Earth, because if you see it, whether in person, on video, or in a photograph, it's game over. It will know you spotted it and dedicate its whole being to ending your life. And while it ends you violently and gorily, other people will likely see it. It's a gigantic humanoid creature after all. This leads to a wonderful chain reaction of carnage. Folks have tried to stop it while it frenzied before, but to no avail. Like bullets, tank rounds, anti-air guns, nothing kills it. So with the right sequence of unfortunate events, this thing could hypothetically be seen by everyone on Earth at some point and then spend all of its time hunting down every last person. I guess there would be some survivors in remote areas, but that's about it. Although it is possible that 096 is already dead, but we won't know for sure unless something happens. Coming in at number 4, we've got SCP-610. Now here is a different thing that could spread across the world killing humans. The Red Death, the flesh that hates, meat disease. Hooray! This stuff is nasty, and if it ever manages to make it out of largely tundra conditions, we're all gonna be turned into rotting meat. It's a highly contagious disease that starts as a rash and rapidly deteriorates. Human features disappear, subsumed by fleshy tendrils and awful blistering tumor growths. Eventually, nothing recognizable is left, just horrifying meaty abominations. This has been known to take out entire rural settlements very quickly, but if it runs out of places to spread, it can be contained. The Sarkics tend to skirt that last bit though, and bring it to new places for the glory of Yaldabaoth. Coming in at number 3, we've got SCP-2006. So think of the scariest thing ever, like your personal greatest fear. Okay, now say it out loud. Do it, I dare you. Did you say it? Well, if you did, just know that if SCP-2006 overheard, it would immediately transform into that thing. Its whole purpose is to scare the ever-living crap out of people, and it has these shape-shifting powers to do so, no limits on what it can change into. But thankfully, it's not too bright and hasn't actually figured out how to scare people. In fact, most folks have convinced it that things that aren't scary actually are. But it could figure out real scary, and if it does figure out that something like war or widespread disease are scary, well, actually, you know what? Maybe 2006 is already working at ending the world. Coming in at number 2, we've got SCP-2440. To be honest, this one probably already has us all in its grips. Give it a few more years and it will end the world. In simple terms, it's an extra-dimensional entity that gets stronger the more people learn about it. So, sorry, I guess. It can be inserted into any form of media and then control those who encounter it. When only a few people are aware of it, 2440 influences them to have a heightened interest in certain types of media, namely sci-fi, horror, and fantasy. Over time, as the knowledge spreads, it can take control of people's bodies. Eventually, it gains reality-bending powers and can control many people at once. If it continues to spread, it will inevitably be able to control all of humanity and then physically manifest within our world, ending us all. And finally, at number 1, we've got SCP-871. It's cakes. More than 250 of them. If one isn't consumed in its entirety daily, another one will appear. Left long enough, these cakes will exponentially expand, eventually consuming everything in chocolatey decadent goodness. So let's hope they can keep these pastries under control over there at the Foundation. Dying by cake sounds like fun until you're faced with a wall of fruitcakes threatening to rob you of all oxygen before you can say, "Let me grab a glass of milk."
SCP-457 is a flame. Aside from causing minor burns, you probably wouldn't think it's capable of causing much harm or really being all that dangerous. But as you know, SCPs are contained for a reason, and it's usually because they would destroy the world if they weren't. Or at the very least be responsible for numerous casualties. And to no surprise, that is the case with this flame, aka SCP-457. How's it going, guys? Welcome back to LBQ. I'm your host, Jared Bronstein, and today we'll be answering the question, what if SCP-457 was real? We gotta give a quick shout out to Brandy Rogers, who has been asking us to cover this SCP for some time now. And I encourage you guys to drop us some comments below with questions you have. If we choose them, you'll get a shout out. As always, we'll have some comment replies to follow this one, but for now, let's get right into it. As always, we'll start with its class and containment procedures. Interestingly enough, this specific SCP's class is Euclid, with the potential of it being Keter. Containment procedures require 457 to be kept in a 5 by 5 meter chamber with at least 9 inches of fireproof material around the chamber, as well as a blast-proof window to observe 457. The window is equipped with an emergency blast shield, and the opening of the chamber also has at least 2 temperature-controlled airtight chambers that are to be sealed in case of emergency. The main chamber is to be kept at a high humidity, with misting sprinklers consistently turned on and a drain on the floor. There are also emergency hoses which need to have a minimum of 300 psi of water pressure, and a small structure on the wall that is kept dry at all times, which allows 457 to remain in its form and gives it minimal protection. Anyone who enters the chamber is required to wear at least Class A temperature-controlled flame-retardant sealed suits and enter in groups of 3, with 2 people equipped with emergency fire extinguishers as well as high-grade blast shields in case of emergency. Personnel should only enter the chamber to repair any damage to the chamber or sprinklers, or to supply 457 with its daily fuel material. If for any reason 457 is to get hostile with those in its chamber, personnel are authorized to use emergency extinguishers and hoses until it retreats. Should 457 break containment, emergency sprinkler systems will be activated and everyone will be supplied with extinguishers and blast shields. So what exactly is this thing aside from dangerous? Well, it appears to be a flame. 457's actual composition is unknown, and it appears to be undetectable and can even go invisible at times. When given enough fuel, 457 will take the shape of a human, although it appears its most natural form is simply a flame the size of a lit match. Well, in this form, 457 appears to be like any other flame you'd find on a match. However, it appears to have the ability to jump to more flammable materials or flames to increase its size. As the flame grows, it is able to assume more complex shapes, which also appears to increase the being's intelligence. Although it's unclear how this flame gains the knowledge it does, when 457 is able to reach human size, it tends to appear to be a human covered in flames. 457 can communicate by writing letters out in its own flame, burning words into the wall, and occasionally through speech. At a certain size, which is currently unknown, 457 will split into separate beings, and this trend will continue if the beings continue to grow larger by finding new fuel sources. That being said, it appears multiple beings of 457 are aggressive toward each other, attempting to either consume or extinguish each other, especially if there is a limited fuel source. It seems 457's only goal is to acquire large sources of fuel to expand its size and spread. The danger here is as 457 gets larger, it gets more intelligent, allowing it to learn new things and mimic behaviors. In the past, 457 has actually purposely damaged and broke some of the sprinkler systems in its chamber, and occasionally has set up complex traps. 457 has also attempted to trick personnel into providing it with more fuel, and due to how unique of a being 457 is, its psychology is impossible to understand. It's unknown how 457 initially formed, but was found in 2007 in a classified area, and was responsible for starting multiple wildfires. An addendum on the SCP website depicts an aggressive 457 speaking with a classified doctor. After multiple attempts of asking 457 to step away from the glass window, 457 then started moving around its chamber looking for a way out. Eventually, it damaged the sprinkler system and destroyed a portion of its fuel injector, giving it access to gallons of gasoline. An explosion went off, and this information was gathered from security footage. 457 has since been moved to a higher security chamber. So as you can see, 457 is quite an interesting one. So what happens if it's real? Well, I think it's safe to say a lot of things would burn. It appears this flame is next to impossible to put out, and as it grows larger and consumes more fuel or flammable material, it becomes more intelligent, which in turn makes it more dangerous. It's unclear at what size this thing separates, but when it does, the two flame-like beings try to take each other down anyway, so it's not like we'd have to deal with an army of fire people. That being said, having a flame that grows in size and intelligence is still quite scary. It clearly has the ability to start wildfires, which is incredibly dangerous and potentially deadly. It's unclear where this thing was located and how it would do in colder temperatures, such as a Canadian winter. Odds are it wouldn't last, meaning the flame would most likely want to be somewhere with a consistently warm temperature and very little precipitation. Regardless of where this thing would live, it would consistently be trying to expand, which would mean fires would be at an all-time high. As previously mentioned, this thing was originally found to be the cause of wildfires, so it's more likely than not it decides to live somewhere with tons of trees or anything flammable. My best guess would be maybe the Amazon, as there is a ton of real estate there. Unfortunately, we already had issues with the Amazon burning down, and more recently with Australia, so we know how detrimental fires can be. So if 457 was real and wasn't already contained, we'd be in serious trouble. People would lose their belongings and possibly their lives, animals would certainly be affected, and the world itself wouldn't appreciate the pollution the burning trees would emit. Unfortunately, I find it incredibly unlikely that we determine a composition of a flame is responsible for all this, which means things may burn until there is nothing left. Even with our best efforts to put out the fires, which we'd be able to manage, upon realizing the fire is impossible to put out, even on a small scale, would still stump us. There is the possibility we tried to hose 457 while it spreads, which would have it react in an aggressive and hostile manner. Upon realizing this, we may try to capture it to study it, which could also lead to some serious issues. Considering how 457 is manipulative and gains intelligence with size, who knows how much damage it could do to researchers and scientists trying to study it. Ultimately, it's unclear how we'd be able to stop this thing. Maybe hosing it down or using fire extinguishers would kill it, for lack of a better word, but it's unclear if there is any concrete way to completely get rid of this being. Which means, eventually, this thing may just burn down our world. And there you have it for what if SCP-457 was real. Once again, shout out to Brandy Rogers for the suggestion, and make sure you guys drop some comments below with other SCPs you'd like us to cover. For now, let's reply to some comments from the video, what if Nemesis was real? Balmain Richard said, scientists just be making anything on God, lol. I mean, that's how they learn, right? They experiment and they try things and they try new things and they study it and they learn from that. So yeah, they make things, and sometimes they're great things, and sometimes they're bad things, you know? Like, we find cures for medicine, and that's good, and sometimes we create mutant, robotic, zombie monsters, and that's bad. Ahmed Mahmood said, what if your heart was on your right side, instead of your left, how would it affect your body? I feel like it wouldn't at all. Like, I feel like everything would just be shifted. Like, I feel like, depending where, like, I don't know that the human anatomy, but like, your organs would all kind of just move. So if like your heart is on the left side and your kidneys on the right side, it would just flip. Again, I don't know the human anatomy, maybe your kidneys are on the left, I have no idea. But point being, I feel like we would still function the same and things would just be moved around. But maybe it would change everything. I don't really know, I'm not a doctor, so I couldn't tell you. But could be a life's biggest questions, haha. Kai the Fox said this would be scary. A lot of this stuff we covered would be scary if it was real, and that's why I'm glad that I have the pleasure of understanding it and researching it and knowing that none of it is real, so that's fantastic. Anyways guys, gonna wrap this one up. I've been your host Jared Bronstein, and we'll see you guys in the next one.
Imagine a creature that despite everything, despite uncountable times that it's been destroyed in the most painful and devastating manner, atomic weaponry, hellfire, an entire arsenal of military-grade missiles, the most corrosive chemical compounds known to man, hell, even the cosmic power of love and kindness, none of which eliminate it. Its body is battered and ruined, but yet it refuses to die. Oh, and also, it despises humanity and everything we stand for. This one's not so pretty. Before we kick this off though, this video is sponsored by Amino Apps, and if you're a fan of the SCP Foundation, then you're definitely going to want to get in on this one. Amino Apps is a mobile network of individual communities dedicated to all things fandom, uniting people across the planet by their passions and interests. There's literally a community for everyone, from Pokemon to the New England Patriots to Super Smash Brothers, and of course, our awesome friends at SCP Foundation Amino. So as part of our pledge to the SCP Foundation community, we want to find out about your favorite anomalous entity and why. We've set up a poll over at SCP Foundation Amino, so why don't you get involved? To participate in our poll, make sure to hit the link in the info box below so you can get your hands on the Amino app for absolutely free, may I add, on Android and iOS. Once it's downloaded, simply search SCP Foundation Amino and you're good to go. Then of course you can vote in our poll and we can nerd out about all things SCP. Oh, also remember that you can find us on Amino under the username Life's Biggest Questions. See you there. Hello internet and welcome back to the most inquisitive channel on YouTube, Life's Biggest Questions, your one-stop shop for everything that incorporates the weird, wonderful world of the SCP Foundation. As always, I'll be your disembodied floating voice, Jack Finch, as we cautiously ask the question, what if SCP-682 was real? As you all may know, we've cultivated quite the relationship with our partners over at the SCP Foundation, and with each and every examination of the archive, we slowly achieve our goal of gently letting the world know the existence of some of the most terrifying anomalous entities under the Foundation's containment. Wait, that wasn't meant to be in my script. I thought we were lying still. Oh well, if you know anything about the SCP Foundation, you'll know that perhaps one of its most iconic entries is that of the hard-to-destroy reptile, the unkillable lizard, SCP-682, a creature of such seething hatred that even SCP-999, the literal living embodiment of joy, has a hard time trying to convince him that he isn't the personification of pain and misery. Spoilers. He is. As the record states, SCP-682 is a large, vaguely reptile-like creature of unknown origin, although it is widely considered that he's one of the Scarlet King's 7 Leviathans, which is bad news all around. The hard-to-destroy reptile appears to be extremely intelligent and has been observed on multiple occasions communicating with other skips, such as 79 during limited periods of exposure. The most worrying component of SCP-682's existence is that it appears to have a hatred of all life, which it erroneously expresses pretty much every time the Foundation and its researchers try to sit it down and speak to it. But what's all the fuss about? Well, SCP-682 has continuously been observed to have extremely high strength, speed and reflexes, which it demonstrates pretty much every time it's participated in a containment breach, which admittedly is worryingly often. Its body grows and changes at a staggering rate, growing or decreasing in size as it consumes or sheds material. It appears to gain energy from anything that it ingests, be it organic or inorganic. And here lies the system that makes 682 so terrifying. Although it is continuously contained in a vat of acid, it demonstrates the ability to constantly regenerate its dissolving body. 682's regenerative capabilities and resilience are staggering, and the creature has been observed moving and speaking with its body 87% destroyed or rotted. 87%, that's like a foot, a bit of an ankle, an eye, and a few teeth. That's pretty worrying, right? Well, what if a creature of such terrifying magnitude was real? How would we contain such an immovable force? In actual fact, our best bet would be to look at the techniques already employed by the SCP Foundation, and thankfully hope our lucky stars that such a theoretical organization may or may not already exist. It's difficult because our frame of reference is pretty much non-existent. Let's take a look at one of the most dangerous containments on Earth right now. The Elephant's Foot, also known as Chernobyl's hot mess, is an extremely radioactive mass of corium formed during the Chernobyl disaster in April 1986. The radiation level near to the mass is approximately 8,000 units of radiation per hour, an unparalleled lethal dosage that is essentially a death sentence just by being close to its vicinity. The only solution that we have for the Elephant's Foot is, well, better leave it there for a few thousand years while it cools down. And for the most part, that's good enough for us. Don't go near the Elephant's Foot. Simple. But that's not really the same, is it? The Elephant's Foot doesn't hate us like 682 does. It just is. It's a thing. It can't move, thankfully. Generally, our tactic as a species has been avoid it if it's dangerous, or get enough friends to fight it. The Elephant's Foot is easy. Don't go there. In the wilderness, it was a different story. Hide up a tree, get enough friends to throw rocks at that lion, and hope that it either dies or runs away. That tactic has pretty much seen us safe and sound for the majority of our species' time on Earth, and still translates to this day. If there's a grizzly bear on the loose, enough people with enough tranquilizers and rifles will sort it out. But here's the problem. SCP-682 can't be tranquilized, and it can't be killed. Out of all of the Foundation's containment, 682 has notched up his fair share of breaches. To date, the hard-to-destroy reptile has attempted to break out on 17 separate occasions, and its successful breaches have numbered at 6. The Foundation's procedure during a breach has been to employ all available mobile task forces to track and eventually recapture it, although no mobile task forces with fewer than 7 members are cleared to engage it because, usually, a lot of them don't survive. Again, remember what I said about hiding up trees and throwing rocks at that lion? Yes, same kind of thing, except instead of throwing rocks, you're throwing your friends at it. So what does the Foundation do? Well, they contain it in an acid-resistant steel-plated containment chamber filled with hydrochloric acid and hope for the best. Yeah, it hasn't been the most successful course of action, and the Foundation are pretty much sick and tired of the whole deal, but I think I've got a better plan. So, hear me out. I feel like we've got two possible scenarios. First up, let's look at the deepest point on the planet. The Kola Super Deep borehole in the Pshensky district of the Kola Peninsula in Russia. Its greatest depth is 12,626 meters or 7.19 miles down. So there we have it. Throw them down the hole, fill the whole thing with hydrochloric acid, seal it up with steel plating and hope for the best. Eventually he'd get out, but at least we wouldn't have to worry about it for a while. The second possible scenario is perhaps a little more lofty. 682 is a threat to our planet and its people, so why don't we make it the problem of another planet? Let's subdue it in a sealed vat of acid, strap it to a rocket-propelled missile, and send it to the moon. Yeah, it might mean that we wouldn't have a safe base of operations for our lunar colony, but hey, at least we've still got Mars, right? Well, there we have it, folks, our two-step guide on how to finally get rid of the hard-to-destroy reptile problem. I hope you're listening, SCP Foundation. Thank me later. Again, we'd like to give a huge shout-out to our awesome sponsors at SCP Foundation Amino. Make sure to vote in that poll, and we can figure out if SCP-682 really is the most fearsome entity around. Cheers for sticking around all the way to the end, guys. As always, I've been your host, Jack Finch. You've been watching Life's Biggest Questions, and until next time, you take it easy.
What would you do if given the option to hand select your dreams each night? Don't think too hard about it yet, just consider the pros and cons to perfect brain theater every time you hit the hay. What would you dream about? Love? Power? Success? Having dinner with Dolly Parton? Would you pick the dream each night, or only on special occasions? How would you feel when you woke up, bleary-eyed, blinking hard against a world that simply can't compete with the dreamscape? It's an interesting proposition and one we'll explore in depth today. Hello fellow friends and philosophers, and welcome back to the most mind-bending channel on YouTube, Life's Biggest Questions. I'm your voice in the void, Keegan Hughes, and today we are asking an interesting question indeed. What if SCP-1498 was real? Before we get started, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe for more Midsummer Night's knowledge. Outstanding, let's begin. If you're unfamiliar with the machinations of SCP-1498, you might be wondering, what's with all the talk of dreams? It's not just pleasant conversation, it's the main function of the creature in question. The creatures, if I'm being particular. SCP-1498 is a collection of 30 autonomous bundles of phone cords and handsets, all assembled in such a way that they resemble sheep. Classic, considering the many associations between woolly livestock and sleep. Despite being made of outdated phone materials, these beings are fully ambulatory and able to wander around constantly and aimlessly. If someone were to walk up and use one of these handsets like a regular phone, they would hear 3 rings followed by a voice identifying themselves as an operator of the One Eye Roy Collective. Like any good phone operator, they will give the caller some instructions. They'll give them options for dreaming and make enhanced dreaming suggestions. Once the call is completed, options selected, the caller will lose consciousness for 9 hours. And honestly, that already sounds like a dream come true. 9 whole hours of sleep? What is this, paradise? During these 9 hours, the caller will indeed experience whatever dream they ordered. Every detail will be correct, every addition tended to. Whatever their perfect dream might be, if they ordered it, they got it. Upon waking up, they'll let you know that they experienced the requested dream and likely want to return to that as soon as possible. I mean, wouldn't you? If someone uses 1498 repeatedly, they'll begin to notice changes to their body and mind. A desire to sleep as frequently as possible will develop, especially if they have access to the SCP. Then, over time, portions of their head will be replaced with telephone parts similar to the ones making up these sheep creatures. They'll start coughing up telephones with cords extending into their esophagus. Hair will become telephone wires, ringers will replace their ears, and their voice will sound like a dial tone. All of this is distressing, but the subject will continue use in order to get those perfect dreams. Eventually, an entire rotary phone will assemble itself on their head, and these subjects will display the same intelligence as instances of 1498. These humanoid phone beings are known as 1498-1, and there has been no successful reversal of this process. They'll spend the rest of their days wandering about making phone sounds. But hopefully they're happy within the dream. Maybe it's an eternal one within. It's kind of like choosing to enter the Matrix, but without any of the weird fluid tubes or cool green binary. You could know Kung Fu. Why does this happen? Who are the One-Eye-Roi? Well, if that name sounds familiar, it's because the One-Eye-Roi are primordial deities in Greek mythology, the personifications of dreams taking the forms of black-winged demons. But the demons here aren't black-winged. In fact, we don't even see them at all. It seems that the sheep are primarily vessels through which the collective spreads their influence. In these stories of old, these deities would present different images to dreamers. Phantazos were the personifications of the elements. Phobator were the images of beasts, birds, and serpents, and lastly, Morpheus were those that appeared human. Morpheus, eh? I guess my Matrix analogy holds up. Homer's Odyssey classifies dreams coming through gates of ivory as false, and ones coming through gates of horn as true. And what do some older people call the telephone? The horn. Could it be that the One-Eye-Roi are showing us our true selves through dreams by accessing us via the horn? Or am I simply looking too deep here? How do you interpret this? Well, now that we've got the basics down and have briefly explored some of the surrounding information, let's think about what would happen if SCP-1498 was real. It's likely that the world would quickly discover the sheep's properties and divide into factions. There would be those who saw the sheep as horrifying, a perversion of the human mind and body. Those that became instances of 1498-1 were to be mourned as if they had died. People that chose to dream using these anomalous effects would be considered reckless, lazy, inept. These perfect dreams would seem nightmarish. Holding on to the real world with all their might, they would rally against those who would heed the call of the One-Eye-Roi. Hard work and freedom through suffering would be the guiding principles of these people. On the other hand, there would be those who saw the dream sheep as saviors. Folks who believe that the world is full of too much pain, too much injustice. These are the people who would turn to the One-Eye-Roi in order to achieve a sort of transcendence. Through use of the anomalous qualities, people would achieve their perfect dream state. The shambling telephone men who underwent total transformation would be seen as totems of perfection. They had achieved eternal splendor through slumber. I can only imagine that a sort of new religious movement would sprout up from this. As there are only 30 sheep total, they would become a commodity of sorts. The worshippers of dreams would then put systems in place to ensure that only the most deserving had access to the sheep. Charismatic leaders, high priests of dreaming, would find the spotlight and preach to the followers of One-Eye-Roi. Strive for greatness, follow the teachings. Maybe someday you will be given access to the eternal dream sheep. Martyrs and holy folk would emerge too. People who had only partially transformed into phone creatures would be regarded as saints. Ones who resisted the full pull of paradise to spread the good word. A new world order would emerge, looking to the sheep for salvation. Of course, having two groups with beliefs at odds could only result in one thing: war. The dreamers would attempt to assimilate those who did not believe, resulting in aggression between the factions. Attempts would be made to destroy sheep or steal and exploit their capabilities for money and power. Even something so peaceful as sleeping and dreaming would result in bloodshed. And in the end, it would be up to the sides to decide the fate of the world. Would the dreamers successfully get people near and far to submit to the forever fantasy? Or would the pragmatics destroy the means of achieving phone ascension? Or maybe, just maybe, they would learn to live in harmony. It's a fascinating prospect, considering the permanency of many options. Maybe humanity would succumb completely to the warm embrace of the night, full of phone people. If there's no shame in being a phone person if we're all phone people, right? In a way, we're already on the way there, living fantasy lives through our phones, preferring what we see through these windows into another world to real life. How many of you are watching this video on a dark piece of glass right now? Meta, right? What do you think of this SCP? Would the world be a better place if it was real? Would you make the call? Make sure you let me know down in the comments. Speaking of comments, let's have a look at some of your more bleary ones from What If the Flying Dutchman Was Real? Draxus Magnus says, I literally thought you meant the Flying Dutchman from SpongeBob. Technically, it is the Flying Dutchman from SpongeBob. Leedle, leedle, leedle. Am I right? Deck Zed says, R. You succumb to symptoms of scurvy. Your crew has already passed. What will you do? What is this, the Oregon Trail Ghost Ship Edition? I'd play that. In the Hood with Mahood says, do a what if the nun and Pennywise fought? Is this even a question? Pennywise would clap the nun and then do a funny dance on her grave. Named Yukine asks, what if reincarnation was real? You can't prove that it isn't, but I would want to be reincarnated as a bug, just to see through their complex eyes for a little bit. And R62A guy says, we would all be dead. Well, I don't know about all of us. Most of us never see the high seas to start with, but hey, I like your sunny disposition. That's all the time we have for today. Before I literally disintegrate, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe for more mysteries and masteries. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.